Holy God, we thank you for your goodness, your watch care over us. We ask and pray that you would be with us during these sacred Sabbath hours so that we may not only receive a blessing from you, but that we may be able to share blessings with one another. May our time together be a blessing not only for us as humans, but also for the onlooking universe. May they enjoy fellowshipping with us during this sacred hour. In Jesus' name, amen. So I want to welcome everybody to this Sabbath study today. As we were just told a moment ago, we do have some international visitors with us today. So we have more people than I expected. And with so many people, it's actually not that easy to know when someone wants to communicate or say something. So what I'm going to ask is that if you want to make a comment and I haven't asked you, just unmute yourself if you're able to do that. Hopefully everybody is. And just give me a little shout so I'll know that someone wants to make a comment, and then you'll be able to speak. I did ask in the communication if our international visitors could perhaps refrain from responding until the local members make their point. And if nobody is responding, and you have something to say, and you're from abroad somewhere, please unmute yourself and make a comment. But please give priority to the local members here, and those would be the people in Australia and Fiji. They're the local members. If you come from another location and no local members are responding, please feel free to give your thoughts. So you remember that a couple of weeks ago, we were on a mission trip to Fiji, and because of technical problems, we were unable to record the meetings. So today's a bit of a follow-up from one of the presentations that we did there. It wasn't actually a presentation, it was a question and answer with the baptismal teachers at the camp meeting there. And we were talking about the vows. So those who were there hopefully can remember that. And I don't know if anybody can remember what vow we were discussing. Anybody can unmute and respond to that?
13.
Yes, we were looking at vow number 13. So I'm just going to, and vow number 13, if you're all familiar with it, is in 4 sections, 4 paragraphs. And we ended up focusing on the last paragraph. And the last paragraph says, do you recognize that the Sabbath as a memorial of creation represents the seal of God, and that Sunday worship is the pagan counterfeit described by the Bible as the mark of the beast? So that was the question that was posed to the members. And I asked the question what the mark of the beast was. And we had some interesting discussion about that. And we came to a conclusion, but I think there were certain members there who still were not clear about what the conclusion was. So someone asked me if I would mind going over that study again. And I've agreed to do that. So please feel free to respond on the chat for those who want to do that. Okay, so we're talking about the mark of the beast. And if you were to go to vow number 13, you have some references. We have references from the book of Exodus, book of Ezekiel, Revelation, and Genesis. And the References in the book of Revelation are chapter 13 and chapter 14. So we're going to go there. We're going to go to Revelation 13 and 14. So if we're going to go to Revelation 13, what verses would we go to? Who wants to venture what verse we would go to if we're going to talk about the mark of the beast? So someone has said verses 9 to 11. Thank you, Gloria. So let's go to those verses and see if that's correct. So I'll read verses 9 to 11. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity, and he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So did I either misunderstand, or were they not the correct verses? I assume that meant verses 9 to 11. And the question was about the mark of the beast. Okay, so someone has said verse 16 and verse 17. So let's have a look at those verses. And if we go to verse 16, it says, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So it's in verse 16 that we see mention this subject about a mark. So there's a mark that's mentioned in Revelation 13:16. So if we go to Revelation 14, let's just pop open to Revelation 14, and where would we see the mark there? Which verses would we go to? So I'm going to assume that when Gloria said verses 9 to 11, she was actually referring to Revelation 14, not 13. She hadn't made a mistake. Yes, she just said that there. So we'll read verses 9 and 11. We'll skip verse 10. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, and then we'll skip verse 10. And the smoke of the torment ascendeth up for ever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. So we have a few verses that talk about the mark of the beast. And the question that we wanted to address in the study that we were having back in Fiji and the one we're having now is to try to understand what the mark of the beast is. So if we go to, if we went back to the vow says, do you recognize the Sabbath as the memorial of creation, represents the seal of God, and that Sunday worship is the pagan counterfeit described by the Bible as the mark of the beast? So what is the vow teaching that the mark of the beast is? Well, we have vow 13, and it's paragraph 4. What does the vow teach? Someone can give an audio response. So if you're allowed, if you're able to unmute yourself and tell me what you think.
Is it Sunday worship?
Sunday.
Okay, so Ray says it's Sunday worship. And Ray, I don't know if you had the vow in front of you or if you remembered what I said, or I can reread it again. Tell me why you think it's Sunday worship. Would you like me to read it again, or do you remember?
Could you read it again, please? Sorry.
Sure. Do you recognize that the Sabbath, as a memorial of creation, represents the seal of God, and that Sunday worship is the pagan counterfeit described by the Bible as the mark of the beast?
So yeah, just a plain, simple reading of it says that Sunday worship is the pagan counterfeit, which the Bible talks about as being the mark of the beast.
Okay, so we'll put Sabbath equals the seal. That's what the vow teaches. Sunday is the counterfeit seal. Is that what the vow teaches? If we're okay with that? Unless anybody
That's
disagrees.
how I understood it.
Yeah. And then we said, or the vow says, that it also equals the mark. I'll put mark of the beast like this. I normally put MB, but some people put an O there. Mark of the beast. Does anybody, I'm not saying that the Sunday law is this test per se, but as the vow reads, does anybody disagree with that? That the Sabbath is the seal of God, that Sunday is the counterfeit seal, and that the counterfeit seal is the mark of the beast. Does anybody disagree with that statement as it stands? Either I could say in the logic or a previous dispensation, or how Ellen White would teach it. We know that it's not a Sabbath Sunday issue today. I'm not trying to make that point, so don't respond in that way. So someone could give me their thoughts if they disagree or agree with the vow as it stands. Is it correct or is it a mistake? Who was speaking?
It's correct.
Okay, so if people can give their name and then the response, was that still Ray? Sometimes I can't tell.
No, it's Greg.
Oh, hi, Greg. Okay, thank you. So it sounded a bit different. That's why I wasn't sure. So if people can give their name and then the response. So you said it's correct. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Does anybody think they disagree with that? Or does everybody say,
Catherine
yep?
here, and I'm
Catherine.
not really sure on what the question is. Sorry, are you asking whether we still think that this is true, like for us today, or whether we agree that that's what the vow says? I'm not a bit confused.
Okay,
sorry.
so neither of those. So my question is not what we believe today, because we know if we were to call it the great test is not the Sabbath Sunday question. So we agree with that. So that's not my question. And I think enough of us have said that what the vow teaches is what we've got on the board. So I'm not asking that question. My question is, does the vow, which is paragraph 4, does that represent what our or an Adventist understanding is, or our previous understanding, or what Ellen White says about this subject? That's my question. Is there a mistake in the vow with respect to our normal understanding of what the great test was to be in a previous dispensation? Because if it's wrong, then we should understand that it's wrong. If it's correct, then we would want to understand what the current application is. So that's why I'm asking the question. Is
Okay.
the logic correct? Is this what we believe that it all is? Go ahead, Catherine.
Yes, so I think I think it's correct as far as what Spirit of Prophecy teaches, as far as I understand.
Okay, so that's good. We've got a fair few people here and nobody's disagreed with that. So these vows have been around for 8 years now. They were presented to the movement in 2016. So they've been around for a long time, and I've not heard anybody challenge this vow, particularly this paragraph. So it seems to have stood the test of time. So I would take that as we agree now that our original understanding of the mark of the beast is an agreement with inspiration, that it is in fact Sunday sacredness or the counterfeit seal. So not answering the question about what it currently is, but let's go back into the mind of Ellen White or Adventism. So does everybody think or agree that the Sabbath is the seal of God? Anybody disagree with that? Okay, sounds like everybody agrees that the Sabbath is the seal of God. Has the Sabbath always been viewed as the seal of God? Or is that an Adventist interpretation?
Adventist.
So is that Molly? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so Molly says this is not a biblical truth in the sense that it actually says it explicitly, but this is an Adventist interpretation of what the seal of God is. Does anybody disagree with that?
It's Raymond. I think the Jews saw it as something that set them apart. I don't know if they would have used the term like seal, but I think how they saw it as setting them as distinctly God's people is very similar to the way that Adventism does.
Okay, so ancient Israel or the Jewish people would have seen that what sets them apart from the rest of the world is the Sabbath, but you're not sure whether or not they would define the seal of God as the Sabbath in a, I'll say it in a literal sense or in a codified way, that you can go to inspiration and it will show that very clearly that it is in fact the Sabbath that is God's seal. Have I understood you correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so so Pedro has given us, I think that's Ezekiel 20. I'm going to say with Ezekiel 20. Is that right, Pedro? Yep, okay, Ezekiel 20, verse 12. So I'll read it out. I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. So sanctification we could describe in various ways, but if we go with the definition to say that it is something that's set apart for holy use, that's a pretty standard movement position or definition of what sanctification is. Sanctification is set apart for some different purpose. And God says, I have set apart or sanctified Israel, if we're okay with that part. And then it says, I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between God and Israel, that Israel may know that I have set them apart. So is that a fair representation or paraphrase, Pedro? Okay, so do you see that as does anybody or Pedro, do you see that as a proof text that the Sabbath is the seal? Are we going to see somewhere in those words a seal? Maybe it's the sign or something like that. Is that the logic? Okay, so Pedro sees that as the proof text. Anyone else? Okay, so someone's speaking about a phylactery on their head. Sometimes they wear it on their forearms. A phylactery, I'm going to, tell me if I'm wrong on this, is a little box, often of leather, that you strap around your forehead or on your arm. And inside it is a note or a document or the law itself, so that you have it constantly, a constant reminder. And if I think I'm correct, that you put it on your forehead or actually on your arm, which is why it speaks of, we'll talk about Revelation later on, but you'll see the connection between the right hand and the forehead, if you were to if we get a chance to go to Revelation and discuss that. So is that the point that you're making, Susan?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So just want to jump back to Ezekiel 20 verse 12. Just want to point out that it says Sabbaths, and I don't know how people read that. Is that the seventh-day Sabbath it's talking about, or is it all the Sabbaths of the ceremonial system?
Seventh-day Sabbath.
Okay, so Ezekiel, sorry, Molly thinks it's just the seventh-day Sabbath. It's not all the ceremonial system. Yep. So Greg says it's plural, which is why I asked the question. Because people will disagree with it being the seventh-day Sabbath. That's the only reason I was asking that point. If you read commentators, or even if you go into the context of the passage, people have different opinions of what that is talking about, whether it's talking about the whole sanctuary system, which sets God's people apart from the rest of the world, or it's just the Sabbath that does that. Okay, so maybe people would want to think about that. I guess my only point is that it may not be a definitive proof text, just because of that, and we'd have to look into the context as well. So Susan has said that people wear these phylacteries, which are basically little boxes with inspiration in them, often the law, and they strap it to their body as a physical reminder. So why would you see that as proof that the Sabbath is the seal?
Well, I think the significance of it being strapped to the forehead, I hadn't known about the arm like you've mentioned, so that's additional information. But it just seems to me that because the mind is where you're sealed, that to them, that is sort of a literal interpretation, that they're living out.
Okay, so you've said that we're sealed in our mind. And where
Yes.
if someone else knows the answer, if you do, where do we get this idea that we have the seal in our mind?
Should I let someone else, Elder Parminder, because I'm a visitor?
Yeah, let's give someone else a chance, and if nobody does, you can don't wait too long. Give people a few minutes, a few seconds. If they don't respond, jump in and tell us where you see the seal is the mind.
Revelation 14:1.
Revelation 14:1. And I looked, and lo, a lamb. Oh, who was that, by the way?
Taylor.
Taylor. Thank you. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads. So you're going to take the father's name, whatever that name would be, if it's God, and it's written in their foreheads. Is that your proof text?
I guess so.
Good. Okay, you don't sound as confident now. I'm not sure why. Susan, do you want to? Did you have a different proof text? Oh,
I
Revelation
didn't.
14:9. Someone had 14:9. I read 14:1. 49. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand. Sorry, Susan, you were saying?
No, I was going to use our logic and our reasoning, and that's your cognitive ability there. So, but yes, the proof texts, that's correct. I believe that's the answer.
Okay, so does anybody want to tie that together? Verse 1 says Father's name, doesn't mention Sabbath, doesn't mention a seal. And if we compare and contrast that to verse 9, talks about a mark in this forehead. So we have forehead and forehead, so we can connect the two verses together. So it compares the mark with the Father's name or God's name.
So it's Catherine here. Yeah, I feel like you've just explained it anyway.
Go ahead.
But yes, you've got to compare and contrast the mark with the seal. And the mark is in the forehead in verse 14, chapter 14, verse 9 of Revelation.
Okay.
And then chapter 14, verse 1 is got the name of God in the forehead. So then you're connecting the name of God with the seal, because both of them have to be in the forehead.
So how are you connecting the name of God with a seal and then going back to the Sabbath?
So I put the mark is located in the forehead. So comparing and contrasting with the seal, which is God's mark, if you like to put it as that way, use the word mark. The mark of God must also be in the forehead, because the mark of the beast is in the forehead. So, and then connecting that with the Sabbath, because is that the missing link that I've got? Connecting the seal with the Sabbath.
Where did you go from God's name to seal to Sabbath?
I'm confused. Maybe I'll let somebody else have a turn. I think I've got myself in a muddle. Let me try again.
Okay, we've got mark in the forehead, fine. We've got name in the forehead, fine. So
And
then
I
you
see
could
the
say the
seal.
mark is the same as the name, if you're going to use that. I agree with that. Then where'd you go from there?
I think I'm saying that the seal of God is an equivalent way of saying the mark of God. So just comparing and contrasting those two things with each other means that the seal equals a mark. And so therefore that's equal with the name. Maybe I'll let somebody else have a go. I'm sorry.
Anyone else? Okay, so people are saying we can just go to a Spirit Prophecy quote. The problem with the Spirit Prophecy quote is it's an Adventist perspective. Oh, Tony is saying the fourth commandment. If you'll give me a verse. We've got fourth commandment, we've got Exodus. Tell me where we have a verse where it says it's the seal.
Ezekiel 20:12, Ezekiel 20:20.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Ezekiel 20:12, you said?
Yes, Elder Parminder.
Okay, we've already read Ezekiel 20 verse 12. That's what Pedro gave us. He says, I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. So we've already done that one. And your other verse was what?
In verse 22, verse 20.
Give me the chapter and the verse.
Ezekiel 20:20.
Ezekiel 20, what verse? 22?
Verse
Not
20.
22. 20. And hallow my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. So we have a Sabbath as a sign. Okay, someone said, now we've gone to Exodus 31:17. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the fourth commandment being the only one referencing God's name. Okay, someone give me a spirit of prophecy quote. Someone said EGY or spirit of prophecy. Let's go with that one. By the way, I'm okay with people's answers. I'm not trying to knock them out, whatever, but I just want us to realize that all of this is constructed with logic. It's not constructed in by proof texting or going from one verse to another in a systematic fashion, which is what essentially proof texting is, that shows a clear association. Because here we've got God's name is the mark. We use proper methodology to do that. All of this was just a statement, but this is the first one we've got, and we haven't, I would argue, as if we're doing a baptismal class with somebody, we haven't quite got to the God's name, to a seal, to a Sabbath. So someone's put their hand up. I don't know whose hand that is. Or is it my hand? I don't know. If I put my own hand up, lower hand. I put my own hand up. I don't know how it does that. There's something about Zoom that's anyway, someone else give me a spirit prophecy quote or something. Tell me how we get all of that.
I don't have a spirit of prophecy quote, but I have the, what about going back to Genesis 2 and
Genesis
verse
2.
3?
Genesis 2:3.
Yeah.
And
2
God
and
blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So God sanctified, set it apart for holy use. How does that help?
Well, it's special. It's not a day that's common. As far as
We
God,
figured, I think we could get that from Ezekiel 20.
yeah.
We could get that from Exodus 31. There's two verses, or the two verses that Pedro gave us. So Exodus 2 doesn't give us any additional information than we've already got. Okay, so
pass.
Tina says, Sabbath is a character of God, which is the Father's name. So now we're saying the Sabbath is the character of God. Enemies of God's law, from the ministries down to the least, have I new concept. Too late to see the Sabbath of the fourth commandment as the seal of the living God. Okay, so we've got a spirit of prophecy quote there that says the Sabbath is the seal of God. Revelation 9:4, have not the seal of God in their foreheads, referring to the counterfeit. So God's seal would also be on the forehead. Okay, so let's go to Revelation 9:4. That's a good verse. Revelation 9:4. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing nor any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So we've got God's name and we've got the seal. So now we've got a proof text that connects the seal with the mark. So that was Revelation 9:4. So all we need to do now is to work out how we go from seal to Sabbath. So we've got God's name and the seal. So we can do that. We can do God's name and the seal are synonymous one with another, and their equivalent is the mark of the beast. So someone's given me a response, and it's so complicated, I don't actually understand it. So I'm not going to be able to respond on that. But it looks good. Okay, so can we connect the name to the character of God? Yes, we can connect a name to a character. That's how the different names of God refer to the different aspects of God's character. Often we do the same. We see that in many Bible stories. Okay, so we've got a Spirit of Prophecy quote, and we've got a Bible verse that almost gets us to it.
How about chapter 7, verse 2
Of what book?
of Revelation?
Revelation 7:2. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their forehead. Okay, so yep, so we've got the seal here. Just want to remind us, the reason why this is a purely Adventist phenomena is because the rest of the world doesn't recognize the mark of the beast as being Sunday. I think we're the only people, denomination, however you want to view it, that actually have this idea. Is that correct? I don't think other denominations see Revelation in the same way that we do. They might get they can use all the same logic that we've used with respect to the name, the seal. Revelation 9, Revelation 7 is the mark of the beast. They could get all of that logic, but this one here they can't get because they don't recognize the seal as the Sabbath. And I would suggest the reason they don't do that is because it's not clear. It's not clearly laid out in the Bible that this is the case. Does anybody want to comment on that? So Pedro has asked, what came first, understanding the seal as the Sabbath or the mark as Sunday? Is that a rhetorical question or you're not sure the answer?
No, I actually don't know what came first for Adventists.
Okay, I don't know the answer as well, to be honest, which one came first, but I think they came around, there was a development. So we know that much of Daniel and Revelation was spoken about by Protestantism right through the Dark Ages, into the Methodist Church, into the Baptist Church, and then into the Millerite movement, and then into Adventism. So it's been a progressive work that has developed over hundreds of years. But if you talk about Adventism, it would have developed over decades. So I don't know if it's that easy to trace how you do that. Often we go straight to the Spirit of Prophecy, and Ellen White will have given us this information relatively early on in her writings, not like 1844 early on. It would be a couple of decades after that before it was mature enough to get to this place of understanding. So I think it's been a progressive work to try to understand what all of this has meant. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to say all of that is just to make sure that we know that these are not proof text subjects that we're dealing with respect to the mark of the beast. I want to read the Spirit of Prophecy quote to us now. I can find it. Okay, had it somewhere and I can't find it now. Let me see if I can get to it. Okay, I'm going to go to Great Controversy, page 445, paragraph 2. Great Controversy, page 445, paragraph 2. And we're not going to read the whole of the paragraph, but there's an interesting statement that's right at the end, the very last sentence. But I'm just going to go, I'll read the whole paragraph, but it's the last sentence that you want to pick up on. The beast with two horns causeth or commands all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. The third angel's warning is, if any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark or in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. Most of this is all Bible verses. The beast mentioned in this message, whose worship is enforced by the two-horned beast, is the first or leopard-like beast, the papacy. The image of the beast represents that form of apostate Protestantism which will be developed when the Protestant churches shall seek the aid of the civil power for the enforcement of their dogmas. So that's all the preamble. And then she says, the mark of the beast still remains to be defined. So I don't know if that's a new thought to everybody, but Ellen White's going to say in the Great Controversy, the mark of the beast is yet to be defined. Who wants to venture what that means? So Sarah has given us Spirit Prophecy Volume 4, page 505, paragraph 2. What does that say, Sarah? Tell me what the proof, what that will demonstrate to us, if you're willing to come. But the Sabbath is the seal. Okay, that's great. So we've got 4SP 505, and then we had the devotional, which was DD page 49. I can't remember what DD is. Is it Dark Day? Okay, so someone comment on this. This is GC 445, I believe.
It's Catherine here. It sounds
Catherine?
like Ellen White is about to define what it is. That's the way I read that.
If you went down and read everything that she says, she doesn't.
Oh, she doesn't go on to define it.
Not
So
that I'm
Ellen
aware
White's
of.
not about to define it. Like, I'm just
As far as I'm aware, she doesn't. Maybe
okay.
if someone can check. Don't want to lead you astray. Oh, maybe it is. Let's go with that. After the warning against the worship of the beast and his image, the prophecy declares, here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Since those who keep the commandments are thus placed in contrast with those that worship the beast and his image and receive his mark, it follows that the keeping of God's law on the one hand and its violation on the other will make the distinction between the worshippers of God and the worshippers of the beast. The spiritual characteristic of the beast and therefore of his image is the breaking of God's commandments. Says Daniel of the little horn, he shall think to change times and laws, and Paul style the same power as the man of sin. Only by changing God's law could the papacy exalt itself above God. Whoever should understandingly keep the law as thus changed would be giving supreme homage to that power by which the change was made. Such an act of obedience to papal laws would be a mark of allegiance to the Pope in the place of God. And then she goes on about the second commandment being changed. And then she talks about the fourth commandment. And she's going to use all of that to talk about the change of law. Okay, so that's how she's going to define it. She's going to use all this logic combined with some history to prove that the mark of the beast is Sunday sacredness. So, anybody want to comment on that?
Parminder, it's Graham.
Go ahead, Greg.
Manuscript 118, it's slightly off topic.
Go ahead.
Sunday keeping is not yet the mark of the beast, and it will not be until the decree goes forth, causing men to worship this idol Sabbath. The time will come when this day will be the test, but that time has not come yet.
And that's where did you find that? What's the
Manuscript
reference? Yep.
118, 1899.
I see that number rings a bell. So summarize what that said. If you're able to do that for us.
That Sunday keeping is not yet the mark of the beast,
Okay.
but it will be when the decree is put forth.
Okay, so people are keeping Sunday at the moment, but it's not defined as the mark of the beast. It only becomes the mark of the beast when?
When that decree goes forward that causes men to worship on the Sunday.
Okay, so when you're forced, if that's what causes mean, we did read a passage where Ellen White defined what causeth means. I can't remember what she said. We read that about 15 minutes ago, or I read it to you, but I can't remember exactly the statement that she used to do that. Oh, yeah, commands. The beast with two horns call this, and in parentheses, commands. So when we're commanded to keep Sunday, then it becomes the mark of the beast. Is that what she says? Is that how you read that?
That's what I took from it, yes.
Okay, I agree with that. Someone gave us GC 605 paragraph 2. And that says the Sabbath will be the great test of loyalty. Okay, if we're all okay with the logic that we've used, tell me how we get all of this and we just say we're going to change it. Tell me how you go about changing it. We have changed this test to the great test of equality. Is that how you would define it? I'm not sure how people will define what the great test is. So Sarah says the test is different. Tell me what the test is.
It's Catherine here.
Catherine?
I'm saying the test is it's like human rights. So if it's human rights today and it was human rights back then, that would explain why that mark of the beast doesn't come into effect until human rights abuses are taking place, and which in that scenario is forcing religious observance and violating human rights that way. Whereas today it manifests differently. That's linking them.
So you've said human rights. Sarah has said, I'm just going to put equality. It's not that I disagree with gender equality, but I'm just going to put equality down for sake of space. So we've got human rights and equality. Is there a difference between human rights and equality, Catherine?
No, I don't think so.
You're okay to use them synonymously, or
I think so, because you're respecting people's rights. Like if everybody's equal, then everybody's human rights should be respected. So I think you can use them interchangeably.
Okay, so if the great test is human rights, if we all agree with that, then what's the mark of the beast? The mark of the beast is patriarchy. So, who said yes?
I did, Josephine.
Who was that? I don't know who the I is. Sorry.
Josephine.
Sorry, Josephine was that?
Yes.
Okay, Josephine, you say human rights, sorry, patriarchy is the mark of the beast. Did you want to explain further, or are you just saying yes?
Well, if human rights, right from the beginning, from Eve's time, it's the, what shall I say, the foundation of that's been denied, and women lose their equality. If it's going to be restored, and patriarchy is going to fight it, then it must have something to do with that.
Could you just repeat that simply? I got lost. Someone was doing something to the screen and it distracted me. Say that simply again. Why is the mark of the beast patriarchy? That's what you've said it is.
Yeah. Right from the beginning, Eve's time, because of the curse that came about as a result of the curse, women's human rights taken away from them. When we come to the next waymark, which is the Sabbath, human rights again existed. And then now we've come to the end, we have human rights. It's the foundation of all of those waymarks. What we're trying to do is have equality, but patriarchy would not allow us to. So it must have something to do with that. If not exactly a must have with patriarchy and inequality.
Anyone else? So I've got the mark of the beast is patriarchy, it's inequality, it's oppression of people, of minorities. The mark or seal of God is their character. The mark of Satan is their character. God equals equality, Satan equals patriarchy, dominance, and force. Equality practices, abuse in any form. So, was Ellen White wrong when she did all of this? Was she mistaken? Was it really not going to ever be that? How would we have seen the Sabbath as being this great test of equality?
It's Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
I believe that had Christ come when in the Millerite time, again, if the second advent had occurred as planned, or had they been successful, then that was the issue of their time. So that a decree could have gone forth, etc. But obviously things didn't progress to that in that way. So it was correct for her day, but now it's a different dispensation, a different era, a different test. And I suppose there's a debate as to whether that was always going to be the case, especially if you look at the Eden to Eden line and you consider the first sin and it has to be the final test. So yeah, I don't know. I'm starting to second guess myself now.
I have a comment, please.
One moment. So, Lynn, you've said that it's a different test. I think other people have said it's the same test. Same as in Sabbath is human rights in some shape or form, but you've said it's different.
Okay.
Unless I've misunderstood you.
Yeah, okay. So when I said it was different, I guess I'm referring to the mark of the beast in her day you would say it's different if it was about a Sunday law test. However, you could also look at it and say that it's about human rights. I agree with that. So if you break it down to human rights, even though the subject might have been Sunday law or a Sunday decree, then I guess you could say it's the same. It's just a different topic about human rights that we're dealing with now. Is that more clear?
So men could have carried on abusing women. Parents could have continued abusing children. Children could have continued abusing their elderly parents. And as long as they're keeping the Sabbath, it's all okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's all okay, obviously. But I was referring to if the second advent was going to happen in their time. And that's where I get a little bit confused, because if you look at the Eden to Eden line and you look at the fact that all of that was still going on, then how could the second advent have happened in their day if that was still all happening? Unless, had they been faithful and understood it correctly, maybe, then perhaps all those issues would have been brought to a head. So I'm kind of trying to work it out in my mind, I guess. But when I first commented, my thought was purely about what appeared to them to be the test at the time, which didn't eventuate because they weren't really able to finish the work. So I guess if finishing the work involves dealing with all those abuse issues and human rights, maybe that's why their work wasn't able to be finished. Maybe that was why it couldn't end then, and it had to continue until such time as God's people were able to recognise the equality and the patriarchal issues and clarify that, and human rights. So,
okay, so just one final question. If what you've just said is correct, why begin with the subject of Sabbath? How is Sabbath going to bring you to equality? Why not just deal with equality there and then? People have talked about in its immature state or its beginnings. Why not just deal head on with abuse? Why target the Sabbath? And why do we now say we're not even interested in the Sabbath? We're interested in human rights.
I guess that's tied up with what I'm thinking at the moment. I mean, I guess they didn't understand that at the time. We are looking at it with a broader perspective, with the benefit of hindsight, and with the three angels' messages. They didn't really continue on and receive that light. So I guess they were very, simplistic in their view, whereas we've become more complex. So we've come to understand how the Sabbath relates a bit better. I mean, I think we're still trying to come to terms with that, how that relates to human rights issues. But I think
do you actually get it to relate to human rights issues?
I do, if you relate it to the character of God. If the Sabbath is the seal of God, as in when we're looking at those who keep my law and put my law in your hearts, in your minds shall I write them. Basically, if we are to have the character of God and the Sabbath is the sign of that, then I can relate that to equality and to human rights in that regard.
Okay. I think Josephine was making a comment a while ago and I didn't let you finish. If you want to make a comment?
I haven't started. Recently, you have had a new look at 9/11 and 90 page 11. What you try to do is crystallize the movement's position. And I feel like this is what you're trying to do with this issue, to bring it to our minds more vividly. When she was talking about the Sabbath, she's talking to the church. As priests and Levites now, basically we're going to be Sabbath keepers. And I think if you are going to be in that category, well, I want to connect that to the equality and human rights. We are linked to those issues, and those issues may have, if I'm looking at I don't like the word tentacles, but tangents. You know, there's so many forms of inequality. There's so many forms of human rights
Josephine,
that are.
all that you've said is true, but my question, I think, was a relatively simple one, was how do you go from Sabbath Sunday to human rights? How have we made that leap?
How about 1888?
1888? What?
When
Jones is going to go back to his house and abuse his wife. Not literally. I'm not saying I don't mean that in any meaningful way, but all he's going to be talking about is the Sabbath. He's saying you can't violate my Sabbath rights, and I won't violate your worship rights. But none of that is actually really addressing the subject of human rights or abuse, except in a very narrow sense.
Okay.
Most people across the world who are abusive, most men who are abusive, will all defend human rights. The rights that they will defend is their right to have religious liberty, which is the same right that Jones is asking for, religious liberty. And the religion that he worships or he believes in or he adheres to, as most other religions allow, is patriarchal and sexist. I just want to know, were they wrong to do all of this? Or if they were correct, what's the connection between all of this imagery that we read in the Bible that we're going to now transfer over to us?
About the method of stuff.
I'll let Ray, you
Sorry,
have a go.
Josephine, you go.
No, I'm
Go ahead,
finished.
go ahead, Ray.
I've lost.
Is it when we recognized that these things were written when the message was about Christendom and focusing on Christendom, but now we recognize that it's gone global and beyond the reaches of just the Christian world?
By the late 19th century, early 20th, Adventism was pretty focused on evangelism. We're talking about a time period just before and just after Ellen White moved from the United States to Australia. And in that time period, Africa is colonized and it's all settled down. And diamonds are now being discovered in South Africa, particularly. And there are wealthy Adventists that are bankrolling much of the work through the diamond mine industry for evangelism. So we have a focus on taking this message to the world. It's not just about Christendom. They might call them the heathen or the people in the dark lands, however they would, describe it in the Victorian language, which is not pleasant. But they would view things in a very similar way to us, I think. If the point you're making is all they can think about is Christian, for sure. And if they're thinking that, why aren't we? Why have we got out of the Christian mindset and we've got into a humanistic mindset? How have we legitimized all of this symbology and turned it into something completely different?
Is
or
it
is all
because
symbology, was it always wrong to begin with, or was it right for that dispensation? And if it was right for that dispensation, does that mean that dispensation was never going to make it anyway because it was defunct? And patriarchy could be alive and well in 1888. Son-in-law's coming, Christ is coming, and we're all going to go to heaven as in the patriarchal model. It's all going to get sorted out there. I'm not sure how people view it.
I've asked questions about this before, about like how would God have taught them about sexism before, in this time period, and my understanding from the response was that it would be part of their instruction in that 1,000 years of unlearning.
Okay, so I'm okay with that answer. That God will cut short the work in righteousness and carry on the work in heaven. I think we believe that now. We're not going to get everything sorted out, so it'll get cut short. But why is the Sabbath the target? Why not real stuff? Like real human rights? Why this esoteric thing? What's driving their mind? That's what I want to kind of get to.
Is it the papacy? The thoughts of the papacy?
Who's speaking?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Carry on.
I was thinking, could it be in their thoughts the papacy was going to, because if they're looking that way, then they fault the papacy for the Sunday and, all the evils that have befallen people with the idea of the state of the dead and all of that. And so that would be the issue if they were focusing on the papacy.
Very good answer. I like that answer. So we're quickly running out of time, and we don't have the time now for me to read a really nice comment from A.T. Jones, and I've probably even lost it now because it's buried in my notes somewhere. And let me see if I wrote it down. Yeah, maybe I did. Okay, so wait, let me see if I can find it. Yes, so Susan has said maybe it's because they're focused on the papacy. And if she's going to say that, I'm going to just take that one thought and I'm going to add to it. So I'm not saying Susan has said this. So I don't want to put this on her shoulders and say this is what she said. But I'm going to take that thought, the focus on the papacy. So a couple of thought questions. Are we supposed to be focusing on the papacy in the late 19th century? Because that's what they're doing. This is a very papal-focused model or worldview. If you see Ellen White's arguments, the ones that we just read, when she says, well, you've got to define the mark of the beast, which was here, and then Graham gave us a really nice quote in manuscript 118 that says, Sunday keeping isn't the problem yet. It's bad, but it becomes a mark of the beast. It becomes the great test, if you like, if I can use that term, once they start enforcing this thing. And who's going to be doing the enforcing? I know we've skipped a lot of the study. Someone just told me, who's going to do the enforcing?
The image of the beast.
Good, we'll go with that one. I don't know who else spoke. I got Molly. Who was the second person?
Yambaki.
And Bucky, what are you saying?
Well, I said the government.
The government. And what did you say, Molly?
The image of the beast.
Okay, we're going to go with the image of the beast. The image of the beast is the one that's going to do the enforcing. We haven't proven that, but we would be able to demonstrate that. And that's similar to what Mbaki has said, that it's the government. So why would they think, oh, what government is this, by the way? Mbaki, you said the government, which government?
United States.
Thank you, Mbaki. That was very good. So it's the United States. So why would the United States ever, so this is for Susan, why would the United States want to force a Sunday law on anybody?
They wouldn't during that time.
They wouldn't, or they would?
They wouldn't during that time period. That's
Then
why.
what's the
Go
Blair
ahead.
Bill all about?
What's the
Why
what?
is the Blair Bill? Why is
Oh.
Jones going to Congress and going to those Senate meetings and fighting against Senator Blair?
Yes, but that was 1888. And
That's what we're talking about, the 19th century. We're talking about
Okay.
the late 19th century, that history. Why would America create a Sunday law? Why would they want to do that?
To keep America Protestant.
Who's
As the
speaking?
people.
Sorry, that was Pedro.
Pedro, go ahead.
I said to keep America Protestant and pure Christian.
To keep America a Protestant nation, to keep it pure. And Josephine said the people. So I just want to make a comment here. I can't prove this. America wants to do all of this work because America has this, as we were just told, has this idea to keep America a Christian nation, which is Protestantism. And where did they find Sunday in Protestantism? Where are they even getting that from? So don't answer that. It's a rhetorical question. So if we just think about this, I want to read what Jones said. And Jones is interesting because he makes a comment, and I think his practice, his life practice, actually isn't quite in agreement with his theology. So I'm just going to read this. I'll give the reference afterwards. It's from the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. It's one of the magazines. And this was written in 1892. So it's a bit of a lengthy passage, but I want to just read it, and then I'll make comment, and then we'll close. This everlasting gospel is the mystery of God, which is again to be preached unto, which again is to be preached unto me. And that mystery, if Christ in you, the hope of glory. There's some typos in this, the way from the software. And that is the preaching that is now to go to the world. Christ in you, the hope of glory, which is the everlasting gospel, which is the mystery. So all of that is taken from Paul. And if you went to some studies that we've done in the movement, all of that should not be new. We've defined what the everlasting gospel is. It's the mystery of godliness, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. So that's all new, so that's fine. And that is the preaching that is now to go to the world. That's the message to go to the world. So if we were just to take that, we could see that's why the great test is human rights. He clearly defines it this way. In the glorious threefold message, which makes up the three angels' messages, and now is the time when the gospel, the mystery of God, is to be preached and revealed in a power and majesty and a glory such has never been known except in the time of the apostles. So now they're going to go back to the apostles, or he is. And when you do that, the argument he's making is about the message that goes to the world is not about Sabbath keeping. It's about Christ in you, the hope of glory, which I'm going to say is equality. It's not about the Sabbath. If it does not even surpass that, so the message now is going to be greater than the message that the apostles gave. The power of the mystery of iniquity being broken off, the mystery of God is to be brought again before the world in all its glory. For I read that in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God, which is the everlasting gospel, remember, should be finished. That's the work of completion in humanity. The work of God will be complete when the seventh angel sounds. So that's familiar territory for us in the movement. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast. So he's going to basically quote Revelation 14, 8-12. Now mark the connection. There goes forth the angel with the everlasting gospel to preach. The everlasting gospel is the mystery of godliness, and the preaching of it to the preaching of Christ in men, the hope of glory. Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. This gospel is rejected, and there is a falling away spoken of as Babylon is fallen, is fallen. So I want you to pick up the point about the falling away. Then out of that falling away comes that against which the third angel warns. So he's going to argue that there's a falling away, quotes, Babylon is fallen, and then he says the third angel warns against or warns about this falling away. So that's what he said. I've just paraphrased to try to make it simple. Now, what brought the mystery of iniquity? So now he's going to define the mystery. What is the mystery of iniquity? It's the opposite of the mystery of godliness, if we can compare the two. The mystery of godliness, the way he defined it, was equality. And so the mystery of iniquity, therefore, is the opposite of equality, which is inequality, which is patriarchy, if we can make that connection. Then he says, what produced or what brought forth the mystery of iniquity? And now he's going to tell you the falling away from the mystery of God. So the mystery of God was preached in the time of the apostles. There is a falling away. And with that falling away, it brings forth the mystery of iniquity. I hope we can see the sequence. The mystery of God, a falling away. It doesn't say it directly now, but it's a falling away of God's people produces the mystery of iniquity. I'll read on. For Paul says, now all of this is Pauline theology, that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. We would argue that that's the papacy. And the mystery of iniquity is the beast, the papacy. Jones is going to say it directly. When the mystery of iniquity has run its course, it's finished its work, then comes the word of God announcing an angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel, the mystery of God, to preach to all the world, to every creature, and every creature, full stop. Then from this also there comes a falling away. And out of that falling away, there comes that angel, which the third angel warns, the image of the beast, the image of the papacy. So I want to summarize that because it's a bit long-winded. He says the apostles in the time of Christ, it's not a Sabbath question. They don't have a Sabbath message. They believe in the Sabbath. They live the Sabbath. It's part of their culture, if I can put it that way, their religion. But that's not what their message is. The message is the everlasting gospel. The everlasting gospel is Christ in you, which is a mystery, or the mystery of God. Now, that's what they're preaching. Sometime afterwards, there's going to be a falling away. And that falling away creates a situation where you get the man of sin coming up, and the man of sin is the mystery of iniquity, which is the beast, which is the papacy. So it talks about the creation of the papacy. So the papacy has been created because the message, the everlasting gospel, has failed in its mission. And the failing of the mission creates a vacuum, if you like, where the papacy can rise up. And then it says, I'm just going to read the last sentence of what we already. Then from this also there comes a falling away. So now Jones is going to say, after the papacy, there's going to be a second falling away. And so I'll quote, and out of that falling away, there comes that again, which the third angel warns, the image of the beast, the image of the papacy. So there are two fallings away. The first was created, the first falling away creates the papacy or the beast. Someone tell me, what does the second falling away create?
The image.
The image of the
image
beast.
of the beast.
Image of the beast.
Good, good. So we've got enough people have understood what he says. There's two falling aways. One of them was the papal, one of them was the first falling away creates the papacy. The second falling away creates the image of the beast. So what falls away? It's the message that the apostles are giving. The apostles give this message, there's a falling away, and it creates the beast. So the beast has a message, it then falls away, and then that falling away allows for the image of the beast to be created. And who's the image of the beast? Not the papacy,
America.
it's the United States. Good. As out of that first falling away, there came the mystery of iniquity, which is the beast. So out of the second falling away, there comes the image of the mystery of iniquity, the image of the beast. Just as certain as the preaching of the gospel by the apostles was the preaching of the mystery of God, Christ in humanity, the hope of glory, just so certainly the second preaching of the gospel is the preaching of the same mystery of God, which is what?
Quality.
The hope of Christ in you, Christ in you, the hope of glory, the mystery, which is equality. That's Christ in you. The same, following on, the same power of God and the same wisdom of God to make known the same Christ in men, the hope of glory. Then, as certainly as out of that falling away, there came the mystery of iniquity, the beast, the papacy, so certainly out of this falling away, there comes the image of the mystery, the image of the beast, the image of the papacy, and I'm going to add the United States, apostate Protestantism. The two things are alike from beginning to end. And now the third angel's message, this threefold message. So when she talks about the third angel's message, sorry, he does, not she. He ends up having this way to say the third has the first, second, and third all combined in it. That's why he calls it the threefold message. Warns against the whole evil combination of the beast and his image. This threefold message has been more than 40 years in the world. This little leaflet, from which I have read before, gives an excellent statement of this as follows, and then he's going to read on. So a little while ago, I discussed this subject about 1888 and the Sunday law. It was in a recent presentation of several weeks ago, a few months ago, certainly this year. And I read a passage, and the passage was a discontent in the movement, Ellen White's movement, that they were saying A.T. Jones was preaching a false message. What was the false? Why was his message false? Does anybody know why was his message false? Not that it was false, but he was accused of it being false.
It's Catherine here. Is it because it wasn't about the Sabbath? It wasn't like a Sabbath message?
Yes, it's not about the Sabbath, but there's what was his message? What would he say? I'm preaching.
It's like righteousness by faith. Oh
no, we just read it a minute
Christ
ago.
in you, the hope of glory.
No, right at the end. Threefold what?
human
The
rights.
threefold message,
No,
the third angel's
the
message.
threefold message. He says, I'm preaching the third angel's message. That's what his blanket statement is. And everybody says, it sounds like what? Catherine, now you can say it sounds like
Human rights. I don't know what you.
human rights. Yeah,
Okay.
they say that's not a third angel's message because it sounds like human rights. And what does Ellen White say to everybody who's fighting against Jones?
Third angels in verity.
That
She
it is
says
the third angel's
his
message.
message, which is the message of, because everybody knows he's talking about human rights. That's what everybody, they know that he's what he's talking about. Or Christ in you, be a nice person, treat people respectfully. They say that's got nothing to do with the third angel's message. Because what is the third angel's message? Everybody knows the third angel's message is what?
Sabbath.
The Sabbath. Everybody knows it's the Sabbath. That's what the third angel's message. They've been preaching that for 40 years. Everybody knows that. And Ellen White said, oh, actually, I would just remind you, but that's the same message that I've been preaching all of this time. So when this person stood up and said the third angel's message is righteousness by faith, which is basically treat everybody nicely, be a nice person, I knew straight away that this was the truth. So we've run out of time. I want to summarize. When we go to Vow 13 and we take all this imagery and we try to project it into our history, and we're dealing with the Sabbath and Sunday, and we get all of this from this imagery and some Ellen White quotes. What I want us to try to grapple with is, were they mistaken? Were they mistaken that the great test could ever be the Sabbath? Because if you go to Jones's writings from beginning to end, he will say, I suggest, in no uncertain terms, that the great test is not the Sabbath. That's why when he goes to Congress and he argues his point, he argues it in a way that is not a Sabbath argument. That's why you see the human rights argument, which you can clearly see in his arguments, because that's what he always does, because his whole message is about righteous by faith. And we say Jones, it's Wagner connected with him, of course. So what I want to suggest in closing is this whole idea about the Sabbath, Sunday, is what Susan intimated when she made a comment about 10 minutes ago, I think it was, when she said, it's the papacy. Everybody's focused on the papacy or the beast. And what they didn't see, Jones sees it, but it's easy to get distracted because he's an Adventist, he's a Seventh-day Adventist, and he's going to get sucked into this whole Sabbath Sunday argument as well, is that there is a focus, an undue focus upon the papacy. And when you do that, you have to go back to the Dark Ages. And we read Ellen White's arguments about the changing of the law. She quotes the second commandment, then the fourth commandment. And that's where they get into this Maya. But his logic is there's going to be another falling away, and it's the United States government this time that is going to be the premier power. And that's what this issue is about, that it's not this Blair bill, this little blip in American history that's dealing with the Sabbath that they seem so focused on. It's what A.T. Jones has said from the very beginning. It's about Christ in you, the hope of glory, which is the everlasting gospel, which is the mystery of godliness. And the opposite of that would be the mystery of iniquity. And all of his language has got no Sabbath Sunday story in all of that. So what I want to suggest is, when we go to Adventist history, or we might call it the Millerite history, and we try to track down and trace the Sabbath, what we can end up doing, because we want to try to dovetail things together, which actually it means we're trying to force fit their understanding of the great test with our understanding, I think we're always going to struggle doing that. And I want to suggest, because we're building it upon a wrong premise, I'm not here to argue what Ellen White said or she didn't say, but what I want to suggest is in that history, when you have the second falling away and the rising of the image of the beast, Protestant America, the issue, the great test would never have been, could never have been Sabbath. They've got sidetracked on that. And that's why Adventism has been in limbo land, or in the Laodicean condition, depending on where you want to mark it, for 126 years until this movement is created. And when this movement's created, because we're the real Adventists, we are in the same mire, the same mess as they are in. So we're going to bring in all of the baggage with the great test, being the Sabbath and the Sunday, with all of that wrong argument. And it's taken us 30 years roundabout to get to the place to come back where A.T. Jones had always anchored us in the everlasting gospel, Christ in you, the hope of glory, the mystery of godliness, which is basically the third angel's message, which is the subject of, I'll just call it being nice, Christ in you, which is basically human rights and equality. And I want to suggest that we don't get hung up trying to rubber stamp everything, or the logic or the arguments that Adventists had in the late 19th century about all of this imagery that we find in the books of Daniel and Revelation. Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody. So I'm not sure how we close a meeting, but I'm going to close in prayer, then I'm going to hand it over to our host. So let's close with prayer. I'm sorry there were many messages and many people wanted to speak. I apologize we didn't get through all of them. Maybe we could save the chat and it could get posted somewhere so that people can have a record of that. Let's close with prayer. Dear Lord, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and my fellow travelers, my friends, my fellow worshippers, as we try to grapple with our past, not only our immediate past as individuals, but our past as Adventists. There are questions that, unless we are willing to confront, we have to leave unanswered. And those unanswered questions will only cause us to be distracted, cause us to become unnerved, and cause us to doubt the veracity of the Sabbath, the commandments, and also the truthfulness of the great test. Help us to understand what Jones was trying to teach us. Help us to understand what Ellen White was trying to say to us. Be with us and bless us through this Sabbath day as we talk to one another, our friends and our families, as we share these thoughts with one another, so that we may become more informed and more anchored in the truth of the third angel's message. In Jesus' name, amen.